Hey, come on, hey, stand up real quick. Give a high five to your neighbor and say, that's awesome, yo. Say, that's awesome. Come on, do it. Yes. Hey, get the Lord a clap. Come on, one more time, get the Lord a clap. Woo! Man. First, I love the second service. First service is always weird because that played and like everybody was like, I was like, nope, you're fired. And I kicked everybody out of our church. No, I didn't really do that. Listen, it has been, man, it's great to be able to kind of share this update with you. It was such a difficult year financially, just with all the ups and downs. If you remember, I'll give you a little bit of history. So those who are like new or just joining us, let me explain what happened. So in 2018, in September 2018, we laid out before the church, we said, listen, we believe as elders and pastors of this church that God is calling us to about $3.2 million worth of ministry to accomplish over the course of the next 2 years so that we can reach as many people as possible on the North Shore with the good news of the gospel and give every man, woman, and child an opportunity to hear the message of Jesus and respond to it. And as we looked at and began to budget kind of what we were planning to do and broke this down into 3 categories, the mission, which is our operating expenses and everything that you know to be true about Netcast, and then the new building that we're trying to get into, and then continuing to be a generous church where we give thousands and thousands of dollars away every single year. As we looked at that, we said in order for us to accomplish this, it can't be about the $3.2 million. It has to be about everybody in our church feeling the weight of responsibility of their church and going all in with us, right? We can't be a church where 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work, right? And so we said, no consumer Christianity because it doesn't exist in the Bible, right? Don't get in the boat and not row. And so we called our church to be all in together. And if you remember, September, when I gave you our 1-year update, we were doing really, really well. But then we had this astronomical expense got brought up because of the new space, and they started tearing down walls, and there was just like $600,000 of unexpected expenses. Do you remember that? And I was gone for like a month, and then first time I come back, I'm like, hey guys, we got to talk. And I've always said to you, right, from day one that we are going to be a church that's just wide open about money. There's nothing to hide. We ain't trying to play any games. We just want to be completely honest, right? I'm not going to ask you to give to something that doesn't exist. Like, help us go to the next level. It's like, what does that mean? We're not playing a video game, right? And so it's like, we were going to be honest. And so here was the deal. So I laid before you, listen, we got what we know to be between a $400,000 and $600,000 unaccounted for expense between new security that we need, the fire thing that was going on. We didn't have a fire, but it was like the fire alarm in the system there. There was things with our HVAC system and plumbing. Like there was all these things that we didn't account for because our GC needs to be crucified along with Jesus, raised from the dead too, and all that stuff as well. Just kidding. But anyway, so that was super frustrating, right? But I laid it before the church because that's how we've always operated. And I was like, hey, this is what it is. It is what it is. I'm going to go all in. And we asked some people, can you expedite some of your commitments and kind of bring those forth earlier than you anticipated originally? And within 1 week, if you remember, we started doing prayer, right? We were like, maybe we should pray. And so we started doing prayer as a church. I mean, who would have thunk? And so we prayed, right? So we had 21 days of prayer. And within 1 stinking week, you remember that? We had $313,777 come in 1 week, and yes, it was awesome. And but we still didn't know, right? We still didn't know, but we closed out the year with so many people in our church being a part of this initiative of helping us get into a new space, continuing to reach more people, and brought in over $2 million. Now, last year was the first year we brought in $1 million, okay? So please understand the significance of what has occurred here in our church. It's miraculous, and it's never about money. It never will be about money. It's always about God's people living with open hands, saying, mine is not mine. It all belongs to you, God. Whatever you call me to let go of, I will let go of because it's yours anyway. And then what happens is you see the human heart follow in suit, right? So some of you love your church more than you did before because you've given to your church. Just like when you give to Apple, right? And you get an iPhone, you're more intuitive with what's going on with Apple because you love your iPhone. The same way, Jesus is like, when you let go of things and you give it towards my kingdom, you'll love my kingdom more. And I've seen that happen over and over again here, and I just can't thank you enough for your generosity. Listen, in the middle of all of it, I know I'm a little excited. My stepmom's in the room. I haven't seen her in a little while. This is so awesome. So I'm just excited right now. But in the middle of all of the financial weirdness that was 2019, meant we never stopped giving thousands of dollars away to the church planners that we support. We never stopped giving money towards Embrace for those who are struggling with major trauma in their life and able to get free counseling. Man, we planted a church in the Middle East through support. We supported a church planter in the Middle East. We continue to support the 50 kids in Guatemala that we've supported over the years through Libre Infancia. We sent a missions team to Cape Verde. And all of that, it doesn't even, yes, this is good. And none of, like, in the middle of like, how are we going to pay our bills? We were still doing these things, and we continued to be able to invest. And this year, we're going to be opening up the coffee shop, right? A lot of the things that took to pay for that came this year, right? The play space so moms and dads with kids can come and be and engage with us at the mall. Hoops on Mission, Amira that we continue to support, families that are in need. I mean, we're able to do so much, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Not like because you did it for me, but like, man, on behalf of each other, right? On behalf of like what God is doing through us, man, thank you for being a part of it, right? And that doesn't even include the hundreds of people that our assimilation and connections team we're able to help integrate into the life of our church, okay? So big ups. All right, it's awesome, okay? So again, high five somebody. Just be like, yo, that's good. That's good. That's good news. That's good news. The best is still yet to come, though, believe it or not. All right, so if you got a Bible, go ahead and open up to Jonah. It's in between Obadiah and Amos. If you know where that is, that's a godsend, okay? So good luck with that. But anyway, most of this will be on the screen today, but we're going to look at the story of Jonah. Jonah, a lot of the prophets in the Old Testament, a lot of them, the word of the Lord comes to them. They have something to communicate, and we hear the communication of God. Like, the word of the Lord came, and it said this, and that's what most of the minor prophets resemble. Now, Jonah's a little different. Jonah was a guy who kind of didn't want to give the word of the Lord, and so the book of Jonah is a story about a prophet who actually was unfaithful to do what God called him to do, how God responded to that, and how that changed his life in the end. And so Jonah was a Jewish prophet. I found out recently through 23andMe that I am like over 50% Jewish. Praise God, that's awesome. I was super hyped about it. Yep, and I'm 7% Nigerian. Get off me. What? Okay? So you don't even know right now how good I feel, okay? I am so hyped. Everything in my life is making more sense today. So the word of the Lord comes to Jonah, and it says this. He says, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." Now, Jonah was not interested in doing this. Nineveh was the capital of the Assyrian Empire, and that was Israel's, their enemy, right? And the Assyrians, they were kind of the most barbaric people, most horrific people that maybe our globe has ever known, okay? If you want to research that on your own, you can. But they're the great-great-great-grandparents of ISIS. And so God is saying to Jonah, go over to ISIS and tell them to stop doing evil things. And Jonah's like, I don't want no part of it. Now, he wasn't afraid to go. We do get that clarity in Jonah chapter 4. He didn't want to go because he didn't want God's mercy to be upon them. Now, we've all been there before where we're looking at somebody who's saying, I hope they get what they deserve. And Jonah was no different, right? Jonah is looking to say, nope, they're my enemy. I'm not cool with God. I know God's, he's going to relent of his wrath. He's going to be nice to them. They're going to wind up repenting of sin and like turning and worshiping him. I ain't trying to be family with them. No. And so Jonah is like a racist. He's kind of like he's a terrible, terrible person. He's not a great guy. Okay. And so he winds up dipping out. He's like, he flees from the Lord, it says. He attempted to leave God's presence, and he does so by hopping on a boat, traveling down to a city called Joppa, hops on a ship, gets on it, and begins to head 2,500 miles towards Spain, okay? Literally the complete opposite direction of where God called him to go. Now, while they're out there on the ship, this massive storm breaks out. Jonah is in the lower level of the boat, and everybody on the top level is freaking out, losing their minds. They're throwing stuff off the boat. It actually says in the Bible that the boat was kind of contemplating whether or not to break up, and it does that as a demonstration of everything under heaven and earth will obey God, but God gives us the ability to decide whether or not we will obey him, right? So it's a beautiful narrative of seeing here that all of creation is under his authority, but yet at the same time, God, being created in his image, in his likeness, gives you choices to make. Do you want his presence or do you not? And so Jonah flees. And the captain winds up coming down, sees that he's asleep. He's like, what are you doing, dude? Arise, get up, pray to your God, find your God. We're all trying to kind of find the God who's allowing this storm. Pray to your God. Maybe your God will relent and not let us sink. And so Jonah's like, man, I don't know. I'm not going to. And you don't see Jonah pray. And so Jonah goes up and he's like, prayer isn't going to be the thing. Here's what needs to happen. You need to throw me overboard and kill me because I'm the reason this is happening. And God's wrath desires a death. And so it needs to be my death, because the penalty for sin is death. And so they're like, dude, we're not throwing you overboard. That's insane. And so they wind up not throwing him overboard, but the storm gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And in it getting worse, eventually they were like, all right, time for Jonah to go. And so they pick up Jonah, toss him off, right? And Jonah's in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, 90-foot, or 40-foot waves, 90-mile-an-hour winds, and then the ship sails off into clear skies. And so what you see is Jonah, we looked at it last week, Jonah is on his way to his death. Last week, we see Jonah was sinking to the bottom of the ocean, drowning away from God's presence, just like he wanted. You know, that's a great understanding, great narrative right there. You don't want God, you don't have to have him. You want him, you get him. Right? He doesn't want the Lord. The Lord is like, okay. And he goes and he begins to sing. And as death and judgment are seconds away, Jonah recognizes that his only hope in this scenario and in his life is the grace of God. It's not his own good works. It's not his own good merit. None of that matters. What matters is the grace of God. And he says this. He says, when my life was fainting away, this is in chapter 2. He says, I remembered the Lord and my prayer came to you. And just before Jonah is about to die, it says that the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. Now that is hilarious. I love that it says appointed. The Lord is like, listen, I got this stupid freaking prophet drowning over here. He just relented. He's like, can you do me a favor? Can you Uber ride him to where he needs to go next? And so he does. Like the Lord appoints a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah prayed from within the fish, right? And this prayer is just acknowledging his lesson learned. How many of y'all have been taught some lessons by God? Come on. Sometimes God will teach you some lessons. And sometimes the lesson isn't always so pretty. Sometimes it looks like you got eaten by a fish there, didn't it? Right? And this is his lesson. He says, those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. He comes to this recognition that I was trying to cling to and hold on to my own desires, what I want. I want to take matters into my own hand. I'm not willing to relent. But those who cling to worthless idols, right? If you are trying to do you have no desire whatsoever to walk in the will of God. That's making you God. You are your God. And he says that's worthless. That's a worthless idol. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. In other words, I praise you, God. I've come to my senses. I've realized that my life is not mine. It belongs to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. Salvation belongs to the Lord. In other words, who am I to determine who God wants to save and relent his wrath against? Like, who am I? Salvation belongs to the Lord. And it says from there, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights until the Lord spoke to the fish. I love it. The Lord's like, hey, time to get him out of there. And it vomited Jonah onto the dry land. Now, throwing up is bad, but what has to be worse than throwing up is being thrown up. I feel like that'd be a rough day. And onto dry land, right? The projectile of a great fish throwing you up onto dry land, that might have been worse than being in the belly of the fish. Okay, from there, we see Jonah chapter 3. It says this. We're going to look at just 3 verses and call it a day. It says, then the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time. Look at your neighbor and say, it's coming again. And look back at him and say, the word of the Lord is coming again. Come on. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time. And he says this, arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it the message that I tell you. Sometimes the Lord just got to repeat himself. He didn't even tell him something different. He didn't scold him. It's like a parent, right? Sometimes some kids are just insane. It's like, hey, don't touch that. Don't touch that. Don't touch that. This is what it's like in my household, okay? So sometimes the Lord, it's like, I don't even got nothing new to tell you. Go to Nineveh. And it says here, the transition is, so this time Jonah arose and went to Nineveh, 550 miles away, according to the word of the Lord. What I want to talk to us today about is having a God of second chances, okay? Having a God of second chances. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. My stepmom's in the room. We could attest to this, right? We didn't do the whole church thing. I mean, we tried to be law-abiding citizens and do the right thing and do well and go to school and keep your grades. I mean, we tried to do all of those things. But when God kind of changed my life when I was in college, I was super excited about that. I really, really was. But there were still some things in me, right, that was a struggle. I don't know about you. Maybe you kind of like came out the womb and you were like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Never did anything wrong in your life. That's not my story, okay? My story's a little bit different than that. But even after God began to transform me, or he makes that initial change, but then slowly is transforming us, I still found myself at times like falling into sin, doing things that I know are wrong, right? But I feel like I can't even control myself. And so all of us, in one way or another, are kind of in the same boat when it comes to that, right? The Apostle Paul makes the statement. He's like, I find myself doing what I don't even want to do, and then the stuff I want to do, I find myself not doing, right? So I feel like if Paul could say that, we could be honest about it. And so in many ways, that's my story. And so when God began to call me into ministry, me and my wife and our family into ministry, man, there was this internal wrestle as if like, you're just not good enough though. I don't know if any of you struggle with that. I don't know if any of you have ever thought about that before, but I just want to be honest, like that was a struggle for me because I know me. I know my past. I know my history. I know me even after God saved me. Okay? And so I got a wife who was pregnant before we were married, right? I was a guy who liked to party even after I was saved. It was hilarious. I was telling the first service, our family got assessed before we went and planted the church, and by two different organizations. One was called the North American Mission Board. Another one was called Acts 29. Acts 29 was like grueling. Like they were all in. They want to know everything about how you spend every dollar. They want to know about like how you respond when you're angry. You know, they just want to know everything, right? And so they were deep, just really deep into our lives. There was another group called the North American Mission Board, and they're not like this now, but man, they were just the opposite. They were like, man, you love Jesus? Yeah, okay. You start a church, go. I was like, but I might have a problem. They were like, well, we have let's just do two questions. Do you do drugs? And I was like, no. They were like, well, good. Have you ever? And I was like, like, what's a drug, you know? And so he was like, he's like, well, did you ever do any like illegal narcotics? And I was like, well, you know, I smoked weed before. He's like, yeah, but that was before you were saved. And I was like, well, there was a couple years in college, and you know, and he was like, well, was it just weed? And I was like, yeah. He's like, that's a misdemeanor in Massachusetts. Now it's legal, right? Now it's just straight up legal, so you're good, right? And so he's like, you're good. And then he was like, do you drink alcohol? And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, how much? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't measure it, right? I'm not, like, he's like, well, do you get drunk? And I was like, no. He's like, have you ever been drunk? And I was like, I mean, maybe, yeah. And he was like, well, that was before you met Jesus, right? And I was like, well, there was a time, you know? He's like, well, do you get violent when you drink? I was like, no. He goes, you're fine. I was like, what? Right? And so it's just interesting to have those two different dynamics. But for me personally, there was something in me that just struggled. I'll never forget, I was at a conference called the Catalyst Conference in Atlanta, and there was a guy by the name of Francis Chan who was preaching, and he was preaching out of Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 4 and 5, and he was talking about how, man, have you ever felt as if like, man, your life was made for something more? I just remember hearing him talk about this, and it just resonated in me, and I was like, yes, I do, right? I do, and he read Jeremiah 1, chapter 1, verse 4 5, where it says, the word of the Lord came to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I had already set you apart to be a prophetic voice to the nations. And I just remember hearing that and resonating with it, being like, gosh, I feel like that's me. I feel like, God, you got me. You got a call on my life, but I'm still struggling with these things in my world, right? From my history and my past, and I'm not good enough. I'm not the church kid. Like, I still struggle with things, and I'm not your key Christian guy. Like, that's not me. I just struggle, and I don't know if you resonate with that of not being good enough for maybe God's call on your life, but I just remember feeling that. Maybe you felt it before, right? Like, God, there was a call on your life. There was a time in your life where you just believed with all of your heart that God had something for you, that you weren't going to live this mundane life. You weren't just going to do the 9 to 5. You were going to change the world. Man, you were going to be used by God. You were going to be a living sacrifice. Didn't matter. My life is not my own. It belongs to Jesus. Whether I live, die, or whatever I do it all for the glory of God. It does not matter. And then things happen. You get that new job. And you start making some money. You start kind of holding on to some things. Or you start dating somebody. And you know the Lord is saying, like, this isn't the one. But you're like, I know, but the sex is so good. And so you're like, maybe, like, let's just be honest. You find yourself like in regret, or you find yourself just struggling, feeling like, man, like, could God use me? Maybe it was a divorce. Maybe it was you were raised and being told that you weren't good enough when it came to your intellect. Maybe you're just the person, I'm just not disciplined enough. Or maybe you still are holding on to lies so people don't really know you, that you know you're going to take to the grave with you. You just feel like, man, God can't use me because nobody knows me. Maybe it's addictions. Maybe it's a promiscuous past. I don't know your story. I just know mine. But maybe that's resonating. There was a time where you believed that God would use you, but then you got hurt, or you got taken advantage of, or you got abused, or you have daddy issues, or like you were wrongly accused of something, or there was this life transition, or you just got busy. Hanging with the wrong crowd, an affair, a divorce, a baby out of wedlock, an addiction, can't quit looking at porn. Like, who knows what your story is? But I'm telling you today, and we're going to see today, that the word of the Lord comes a second time, and a third time, and a fourth time, and a fifth time, and a sixth time. And you see this in the life of Jonah. As a matter of fact, we'll see later on in the book of Jonah that even after God vomits him out of the mouth of a fish, sends him to Nineveh, there's going to be this great revival in the city. He leaves the city, gets beyond the city, lays down under a tree, and is cursing out God because he's ticked off that God would actually use him to save such an evil people. And so you see this ebb and flow in the life of Jonah, just like there's ebbs and flows in your life and my life. A lot of times people will refer to Peter as kind of like the New Testament Jonah. Peter, I love Peter because I can resonate. Peter is constantly being corrected by Jesus. You read your Bible, that dude has always got his foot in his mouth, always. And I love it because I live there, okay? So Peter's first interaction with Jesus is hilarious. Jesus tells him, he's like, hey, listen, Peter was a fisherman. He says, throw your nets off on the other side. And Peter kind of crass and like, just probably with an attitude, was like, dude, I'm the fisherman. Like, you're the rabbi guy wearing the robe, doing the whole rabbi thing. You do the rabbi thing. Let me be the fisherman. And Jesus is like, cast the net out on the other side. He's like, we've been fishing all night long, dog. I've been doing this my whole life as a living. But just to show you who's in charge here, we'll be happy to do it. They cast their nets on the other side after not catching a fish all night, and it says that there were so many fish that the net broke. And Peter then finds out he's put his foot in his mouth, bows down before Jesus, says, I'm unworthy to follow you. I'm unworthy to have you even near me. Depart from me, please. And Jesus says, get up, follow me. You were catching fish. I'm going to make you fish for men from this point forward. Another time, Peter tells Jesus that Jesus is not allowed to go to the cross and die for sin, right? I mean, just hilarious. Jesus comes to earth to live the perfect life that we could not live, die in our place for our sin, to go to the cross, right? This was his moment. This is his destiny. This is what he has been called to do by the Father, sent from the Father, and then he will go to the cross to pay for the penalty of sin. And Peter's like, no, you're not doing that. And Jesus looks at him, he's like, Peter, get behind me. You're Satan. I feel like that's rough. Just had a bad day. Peter's constantly put his foot in the mouth. The night before Jesus actually goes to the cross, Peter has a really bad day. He tells Jesus had this thing with feet, and he really loved feet, so he wanted to wash people's feet and stuff like that. Just kidding. He was showing how to serve. But anyway, so Jesus is like, hey, listen, I need to wash your feet. And so he's like, I need to wash. And Peter's like, you're not washing my feet. You're God. And God ain't washing my feet. He's like, if I can't wash your feet, you have no part in me. Like, why are you talking back to God? I mean, it's frustrating when my 10-year-old talks back to me. You imagine talking about the eternal God? You gonna talk back to the eternal? He's like, okay. And so he's like, sorry, okay, wash my whole body then, fine. And so he does. Later on, Jesus says to him, who do you say that I am? And he's like, you're the Christ. And he's like, man, and he goes, I will go to prison for you. I will die for you. And he's like, Peter, you're a lot of talk, dog. Before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. Jesus asks him to come with him later that night and says, hey, can you come and pray with me because my time has come? And Peter's like, yeah, I'm all in, right? He's part of Neckhouse. I'm all in. And so he's like, so they go, and Jesus walks a little bit further, begins to pray, sweating blood because of the agony that he knows he's going to endure, because of the separation he'll have from the Father, goes back to Peter and sees that Peter's fast asleep. Anybody else fall asleep praying? Yes. Can't blame Peter for that one, okay? We had a guy fall asleep during first service. Woke him up. I was like, bro, this isn't actually that bad of a sermon. Wake up and listen to it. It's awesome, okay? Then Jesus is arrested, all right? Jesus' whole message, if you remember, is like love your neighbor as yourself, love your enemies, right? Jesus' whole message is like love. If they smack you on the cheek, give them the other one. This is his whole message, right? And so Jesus is about to be taken. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane. A whole Roman soldiers, a crew of soldiers come to get Jesus. And what does Peter do, all right? It's all about love. Peter grabs a fishing sword and sees the first soldier and cuts my man's ear off. Jesus is like, Peter, what are you doing, dude? Come on. Picks the ear up, puts it back on the dude's face. He's like, oh, sorry. Peter, put that thing down. This is your stories in your Bible. It's crazy. And Peter's got to be like, what is happening, right? Like, just put his ear back on? I thought I was crushing life. I was going to save you, Jesus. He's like, oh, my gosh. So then we come to John 18. John 18, probably one of my favorite, between John 18 and John 21 is just a fascinating story, specifically around Peter, okay? Peter sees that Jesus is taken. He goes to where Jesus is taken to. He's being beaten on his way. He's on his way to be sentenced to death and then before that be flogged, but then sentenced to death and go be crucified. And Peter is supposed to be his best friend. When he gets there, one of a servant girl who was over there watching the front door, right, looks at Peter and is like, do you know him? Don't you know this guy? And he goes, nope, never seen him in my life. So he continues on. He's sitting over by what's called a charcoal fire, right? And we see this in Scripture. It's the first time and only time in Scripture that we see a charcoal fire up to this point being mentioned. And he's warming himself. Somebody else comes up to him and says to him, aren't you one of his disciples? And he's like, no. I'm not. I don't know the man. And then later, one of the servants of the high priest, who was a relative of the man who Peter cut his ear off and was out there when Peter cut his ear off, right? It's hard to hide when you're the guy who's cutting ears off. I just feel like everyone's looking at you like, oh. And asks him, didn't I see you in the garden with him? And Peter says, I do not know the man. And it says, in that moment, a rooster crowed. And Jesus and Peter locked eyes together. And Peter dropped his head and ran out weeping as he remembered, you would deny me 3 times before the rooster will crow. Now, just hours after Peter swears to Jesus' face, I'll die for you. I would never deny you. He's now swearing at the top of his lungs, I never knew you. Can you imagine the shame and the guilt? And honestly, how many times have we all done this? Like how many times we found ourselves, right, making the same mistakes over and over again, right after we made the same promise over and over again. I'll never do that again. We find ourselves months, maybe weeks, maybe days, sometimes minutes later, failing yet again. Feeling like God's got to be done with me at this point. Right? I couldn't even uphold for an hour. I'll never yell at her like that again. I'll never raise my voice. I remember being in college, like, I'll never touch her again. I will never touch her again. I will never touch her again. And months would go by, and then all of a sudden, sometimes it's weeks, And just thinking to myself, like, why is this such a struggle? And this struggle is different for all of us, and it looks different from all of us. And sometimes it manifests itself sexually. Sometimes it's drugs. Sometimes it's just pride and arrogance. Sometimes it's cursing people out. Sometimes it's losing your anger. Sometimes it's saying things to your spouse that you should never say. Sometimes it's spanking your kids out of anger, not out of it manifests itself in different ways every time. Sometimes it's elevating yourself over others. Sometimes it's pretending that you're more spiritual than you are. Who knows what your story is? Again, I'm talking about mine, right? Just asking God, like, how can you use someone like me? We find ourselves asking the same questions Peter probably was. How do I let this happen? Again, how do I walk like such a hypocrite? Again, how do I change? Again, and sometimes we find ourselves, we're just done. I don't know about you, but like this is a reality. Sometimes we all have Jonah moments where it's like, I'm just done. Like I need some space. Eventually, Jesus gets carried over to his crucifixion site, or carries his cross to his own crucifixion site. He's crucified, he's killed, he's buried, wrapped in linens, put into a grave, and then word gets out that his body's missing. And his disciples are frustrated. They're done. And in John chapter 21, we're going to see Jesus manifest himself or show himself to Peter and the disciples. John chapter 21, you could turn there with me and read along. This will be on the screen as well. It says, after this, Jesus revealed himself to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. First name mentioned, Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael, the sons of Zebedee, the two others of his disciples were gathered there as well. And so now we are down to 7. Started with 12, we're down to 7. Simon Peter is a leader. And he says to them, I'm going fishing. Now, if I say, hey, this weekend I'm going fishing, you're thinking I'm going to have fun. He's going back to an old life. This is not fishing for fun. This is an old profession. This is stepping backwards. 3.5 years with Jesus. Peter's defeated. He's going back to an old life. He's going fishing. Watch his leadership. And they said to him, we'll go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night, listen to this, it's going to sound familiar, they caught nothing. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, children, do you have any fish? And he's calling out to them. He's about 100 yards away, and they answered him, no. He said to him, listen, it's going to sound familiar. Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. And I wonder if they're thinking to themselves, we're out here, the fishermen, we're fishing, we know better. So they cast it, though, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved, which is John, who's writing this gospel, which is hilarious because he's referring to himself as the one that Jesus loved, therefore says to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work. I guess he was a stripper fisherman. And he threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, about 100 yards off. When they got out on dry land, they saw, listen to this, a charcoal fire. There's only one other time that the charcoal fire was mentioned in this place, and it was when Peter denied Jesus to his face 3 times. It had fish laid out on it and bread. Jesus brought a meal. Then Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you've just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Now I want you to pause for a moment and imagine this. You've just denied your Lord 3 times to his face. He was your best friend. You looked at him and pointed and said, I don't know the man. And now he shows up. You thought he was dead. You don't know whether or not you should rejoice in this moment or walk in shame. You're super confused. Verse 15 says, when they had finished breakfast all together, Jesus points to one person, probably dismisses the rest. Maybe not. But he says to Peter, Peter, Simon, son of John, which is interesting. He calls him Simon, son of John. See, he nicknamed Simon, son of John, Peter, because those who you love, you nickname, right? My kids are Elle, even though her name's Ella, Abs, even though it's Abby, Jakes, even though it's Jacob, D, even though it's Dan. You nickname those who you love. But now he's saying, Simon. Wonder if that hurt. Because Peter means rock. You're not a rock anymore. And he says, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And I don't know this for sure, but I think Jesus looked at a fish and was like, do you love me more than these? Like, why are you fishing? He said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said, well, then feed my lambs. And he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, well, then tend my sheep. Why are you fishing? He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter, it says, was grieved because he had said to him the third time, like 3 times he remembers denying him before the rooster crows. And now Jesus asking me 3 times, do I love him? And truth of the matter is I think I love him, but when Ish hit the fan, I wasn't really that sure. I sure didn't demonstrate love. He says, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus says to him, feed my sheep. And what's beautiful here is you got 3 times Peter is denying Jesus, and 3 times Jesus asks him, do you love me? 3 times he says yes, and 3 times Jesus responds by pointing him back to mercy and mission. Go, feed my sheep, get up, arise, go. Pick your head up. Peter, yes, you screwed up, but why are you fishing? And I think so many of us in here, this is how we live. We're not perfect. We struggle. We know that all of us sin and fall short of the glory of God, and we walk in shame, and we don't understand his mercy. We don't understand that the gospel, the beauty of the gospel is even yet you have sinned, God loves you anyway. Why? Not because you're so great, because his love is so great. And that is astronomical. That is unbelievable. That is phenomenal. He loves us despite us. He loves us because he is love. And love is the thing that changes us. It's not working hard. It's not all your disciplines. It's understanding his mercy. A true disciple is someone who understands that they are loved by Jesus and then begins to love like Jesus. And so what Jesus is doing here is saying, Peter, just like I told Jonah 800 years ago, right? Arise, go back to Nineveh. I'm telling you, go feed my sheep. They need some leadership here. You're leading them over into an old way because you struggled and you fall. Sorry, bro, this ain't all about you. Get up and go. And that is beautiful, and that is powerful, and some of us in the room today need to hear that. This is our story. We make promises and we fail. We said we wouldn't lose our temper, and we do. We say we'll stick with Jesus till the end, but we struggle to do that because Jesus is the one who sticks with us till the end. His faithfulness leads us into faithfulness. Our faithfulness doesn't make him faithful. That's different. Peter comes to the end of his life. What's phenomenal is he has a statement at the end of his life where he's writing to different churches who are being persecuted and they're struggling. And listen, just like when bad things come your way, you start thinking to yourselves, did I do something to deserve this? Is God getting back at me? Is God's wrath against me? Is God punishing me? In the same way, when the early church was being persecuted, I could promise you that they thought in those ways. And Peter, from a life of experience, writes him these words. He says, listen, the Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, as some count slowness. His promises to love, his promises to sustain, his promises to be with you till the end. He says, but he is patient towards you, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should reach repentance. That no matter what comes your way, God's goal is not to harm you. It's just to always turn you around. And Jesus is looking at us right now through the story of Jonah, and he's saying, arise, get up, go. I have a call on your life. I don't know specifically what that is, but listen to me. God ordained where you would live, when you would live there for one reason, he says, so that man would seek God and perhaps reach out and find him because he's not far from us. God has a purpose and a plan for your life, for you to walk into. It's our responsibility to walk with God as we play that out. It's our responsibility to take time and listen and say, God, what are you calling me to do right now in this moment? And then walk in faithfulness. Maybe he's calling you to forgive the unforgivable. Maybe he's calling you yet again to walk in faithfulness to your spouse. Maybe he's calling you yet again to remove a relationship out of your life because bad company corrupts good character, right? Like, who knows what's going on in your life? But maybe the Lord is saying to you, I've told you this before and I'm going to say it again. It hasn't changed my affection towards you. Just like a father's affection isn't changed because a son goes crazy. You know the story of the prodigal son, right? What's that story? The story of a young man who goes to his dad and he's like, give me my inheritance. I want it now. In other words, you're dead to me. I don't want a relationship with you. I want what I am deemed to get in the end when you die anyway. Give it to me now. And it says the father in love actually gave it to him. And it says that he took it and he went and he squandered it on partying, food, women, just losing his mind, having a good time, and he eventually comes to the end of his funds, and he finds himself having to hire himself out as a slave, right, feeding pigs with no food because now there's a famine, so he's eating the pig food with the pigs, and he comes to his senses. And he starts strumming up in his mind like, okay, I got to go back. I got to go back to be with my father. I got to go back. I got to get back in to be with my father, but he'll never accept me, and so here's what I'll do. And he starts strumming up his kind of like, I'm sorry speech. And a part of his I'm sorry speech is, I should never have left you, I'm sorry. Can I be a servant in your household? No longer a son, I'm unworthy to be a son. And so he starts playing this in his mind. Eventually he gets the courage to get up and go face his father. Now, in early ancient tradition, if you were to leave your father, you're cut off. And so he's rehearsing his speech as he heads back home. He kind of comes to the edge of his property, and just so happens in the parable that his father was sitting on a porch outside of the house and locks eyes with his son. And I don't know what he's feeling in that moment, but it's probably like, oh crap, this is the moment. Oh no, I can't believe it. But as he lifts his head, he sees his father sprinting towards him. In Jewish culture, men did not sprint. It would have been dishonorable and disrespectful. You sprint towards me, but it shows the father's heart. He sprints to his son. When he gets there, his arms are wide open and he embraces his son. He starts kissing his son, and his son starts going into his speech. He's like, I'm unworthy of being a son. And before he can get out the next sentence, which is, only make me a slave in your house, the father says, go and grab the finest robe that you could find in my closet. Go get my ring, put it on his hand, and go get the fattened cow, and let's cook it. We're throwing a party. My son was lost, but he's been found. He's home. This is the story of our God. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how horrible your life has been. I don't care how you've just failed God over. It doesn't matter. What matters is God love supersedes your sin. And so when you're looking at the Father, his presence is chasing you. And let me tell you, you're not that fast. I know you want a keto diet, hit the gym and all that stuff. You're not that fast. He got you. This is the God of the universe. He's chasing you. He'll tear down mountains for you. He'll appoint a fish to freaking eat you if he has to. He will accomplish his will in your life, even despite you. And so now, don't be like Jonah, who has to say, I'm now realizing from the belly of a fish that chasing worthless idols forfeits grace. Receive the grace now. I want you to know that every time you've messed up, God has looked at you and said, get up, arise again. Think of Moses, who murdered a man. Think of David, who commits adultery and has a man murdered. Think of Rahab, who is a prostitute in Jericho. Think about Zacchaeus, who was a tax collector, was considered a sinner by everyone around, the worst of the worst. And when Zacchaeus shows that his life has been turned towards Jesus, he begins to make amends by giving his possessions or giving possessions back to the poor. Christ responds by saying this: today is the evidence that salvation has come to this house. When a criminal's dying next to him while he's on the cross and they're together, after he repeats the words, forgive these people for they know not what they're doing, he looks at the criminal and he says, don't worry, today you're going to be with me in paradise. Because the criminal asked. Jesus' ministry was marked by fresh starts, second chances. I want to read an excerpt from a pastor by the name of T.D. Jakes. I don't know if you've ever heard of him or if you have opinions about him, whatever, but this was turned on to me by Joe Moranti, who was in the back years ago. And it was a real catalytic moment in Joe's life, and he shared it with me. And I hope you get something from this. He's a big black dude who can preach like nobody's business, so I can't say it like he said it, but I'm going to read it as best as I can. So give me a little grace, okay? Thank you, bro. He says, there has to be a reason you survived all the atrocities that happened in your life. Think about your life. You persevered when there seemingly was nothing to persevere for. You fought back when you felt like you didn't have any fight left inside of you. You withstood opposition that when you look back, you say, Lord, I didn't even know how I made it through that. And in fact, God was protecting you when you were even ignorant of your enemies. Sometimes you thought people were your friends, but they were trying to destroy you. And even when you didn't know that what in the world was going on, God protected you. He covered you. He put his hand over you. He spared you. Now, how in the world could you think that you went through all of that for nothing? There must be something in front of you that's more important than everything behind you. You owe it to yourself to keep on living till you find out why you're here. Particularly those who have went through hell and high water, abuse, bondage, recklessness, abandonment, sickness, disease. You owe it to yourself to see what God's fight was all about. There was a fight for you. There was warring in the heavenlies for you. The enemy has sent his choice demons to destroy you. You owe it to yourself to find out what God's fight was all about. You must be significant, or you wouldn't have had the opposition you had in your life. God has a place for you because God is a God of second chances. And that's what God is saying. He's saying, get up, do what I told you to do, go again. There is something in front of you that is far greater than what has happened behind you. And as long as you're sitting on the sidelines asking God, why did this happen to me? You will walk in defeat. So get up, shake yourself from the dust and doubt and defeat. Find yourself in a fury of worship. God is your rock. Jesus is your strength. The Spirit has demonstrated you are victorious. And so understand that you can walk in victory. And victory, not a first time, not a second time, not a third time, but always. God is always looking at you and saying, get up again, 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 get up again. It's like when my kids were learning to walk. I didn't say, stay down, you dummy, you don't know how to walk, that's crazy. You're my son, you should do better. No. I'm like, son, get up. Let's try again. And that's all God's saying. That's all I got for us. Let's stand together. I want you to just take a moment in your seat while you're standing there. I want you to just, everybody close their eyes just so you're not distracted by the people around you. Just take a moment. I want you in your mind, just say, God, okay, what does this mean for me? Maybe God is going to say, hey, listen, this word wasn't for the here and now, but you're going to have to remember this because things are coming. Maybe God is going to say, man, I've told you, get up and go, and you've struggled to obey and be obedient, and you've wanted to kind of play the victim card and feel as if like nothing's your fault and everybody's against you, and God is like, that's not true, get up and go. But I want you to ask the Lord right now, Lord, what are you calling me to yet again? Maybe he's just drawing you back to himself. Maybe there's things in your life that he's called you to do, such as confess certain things or walk in freedom of certain things, and you need to take appropriate steps to walk in that. Find community. Find a healthy place where you can be known. Maybe the Lord has said to your spirit on many occasions, I'm real, come to me. But in your intellect, you've tried to figure him out and haven't been able to. And so you've begun to have doubts and doubt his existence or doubt the authenticity or exclusivity of Jesus. And he's just drawing you back. And he's saying, it's me, it's only me, I'm the only way. But ask the Lord, what is the Lord saying to you? Ask him to speak. Listen.